Hey guys, how's it going? Seth, another solo episode today. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, co-host of the Amazing Anatomy of Marriage podcast. Did you know that? Because you're listening already. Today, I got a chance to interview Rich Jones of Paychecks and Balances. And you guys, this is a solo episode, just me and another dude talking, but it's not just for the men. It's for the ladies. Man, it is such a rich conversation. I call it a cold chill conversation because there were several times, especially at the end, where we both were just like, oh my gosh, that's gold, man. That is so relevant and so important, not only for men, but for people of all genders, I guess, I don't know, to hear what we're saying, to be authentic, to be your real selves, to go get help if you need it, and to just put it out there, right? We talk about Brene Brown, vulnerability, all kinds of stuff. It's inspiring. And we didn't even talk about money, which is his jam. So there's going to be a part 2 to this, guys. So check it out. Rich Jones. Enjoy the conversation. It's going to be a good one. All right. What's up, guys? This show is brought to you by getfaithful.com/anatomy of marriage. Go to getfaithful.com/anatomy of marriage to get hooked up with a real licensed counselor or therapist just like me to talk about anxiety, possible depression, adjustments. There's things that are confusing right now. You feel overwhelmed. You need to go talk to a counselor. So go talk to getfaithful.com/anatomy of marriage to talk to someone just like me to get some things off your chest, right? It's completely confidential. You can do it from home. It takes most insurances, so it's not a whole lot of out-of-pocket costs, guys. Millions and millions of people are going to getfaithful.com to get the help they need. So go to getfaithful.com/anatomy of marriage to get the help you need. All right, let's do this. Rich, my man, how's it going, bud?
It is going well. It is going
Awesome.
well. Thankful to be alive, practicing all my gratitudes, everything else in the morning. So I am feeling good and appreciate you having me.
Nice. So thank you so much for coming on. We were kind of jamming a little bit, and I was like, man, I wish we'd recorded this stuff because we were talking about therapy and transformation and different stories and all kinds of stuff. And I think so many people find that helpful right now. Okay, I'll dive in. For me, I find a lot of help by seeing what other people are doing. Like, oh, what's your success routine, or what's your business model, or what do you think about this? And just hearing other people's stories. Okay, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then taking that and making it your own. But we can jam on that. But for our listeners who may not know your work and who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just a quick intro and bio, if you don't mind.
Yeah, by night and weekend, and now more so by day, I host the Paychecks and Balances podcast and manage the Paychecks and Balances brand, where it's shifting to showing people what's possible. Because as I'm moving through seasons in my life, I'm thinking a lot more about not just how work and money intersect with life, but how everything else in life impacts the way that you interact with work and money. And I know I've had some challenges and things that I've overcome, and inspiration and empowerment are really big things for me. So it's a big focus on showing people what's possible, what can be done, and also how to learn from a lot of the mistakes that people make financially, professionally, and in life along the way.
Yeah, yeah, and it's such. I mean, your work is so cool, and it's funny because just a little backstory for our listeners. You and I, well, Melanie was there too. We met at a Dave Ramsey influencer event
Yep.
in
Nashville.
October
Yep.
in Nashville in 2019, right? I think
Right.
it was. It was
I
like
think so.
right before COVID. I think it was. I look back in the notes. I was like, yeah, that was October of 2019 because I was all, we were
It
all pumped up, like,
was.
yeah, we're going to Ramsey and all this stuff, and just meeting you there and a bunch of other influencers and stuff, and like just I was like, oh, that dude's cool. I want to like get to know him and his work. So we hung out just a little bit there and then kept in touch over the time. But I remember that time. Had you ever been to something like that with Ramsey or anything else like that before? Because for me, it was just like, this is trippy. What are we doing here? Kind of thing. What did
Yeah.
you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing conferences related to digital media really since like 2011, going all the
Mm,
way back. So I'm used to going to events like that. I think the level of thought, care, and everything else that was put into that event was phenomenal. And it was something that kind of came out of
Yeah.
left field, like, hey, we'd like to invite you down. I'm like, sure,
Yeah.
I'd love to come down and have that experience.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is we met there, but I knew who you and Melanie were prior to that because I heard you on Kev on Stage's podcast. However, like
Oh,
that was
okay.
like 2 years. That was like a while ago and during a different season in my life. And someone actually
Yeah.
pointed me to that because of
Oh, for
something that
real?
I was dealing with at the time. So
Oh,
I think
okay.
even the fact that I was following along for so long, and then we met in person, and then we're connecting today. I think there are reasons
Yeah.
behind that. But one thing that really stuck with me from that time down there, and I was telling you this before, is Dave, and I know he has all sorts of views and such, but he said he was talking about the importance of having a message that you can't stop shouting,
Mm-hmm.
and the story that you want to tell to the world, and that kind of planted the seed in a lot of ways for I think what I'm experiencing right now. And when I talk about showing people what's possible, I think that
Mm-hmm.
gets into a lot of the things that I've never talked about publicly before, but that have played an instrumental role in me being able to get to where I am today.
Yeah. So we tried to do this last week and Zoom was just, tripping out and stuff. But you had alluded to, yeah, that one that seed that Ramsey had planted in one of his talks and we were there. What was that for you? Like what was that one thing like, oh, I got to shout this, and I got a feeling that it wasn't all just about like paychecks and balances. It was something deeper, something like, oh yeah, this has been stirring me for a minute. I got to talk about this. Can we just dive straight into that?
Yeah, we can get right into it because one of the exercises they gave us there was to do a 2 minute story, 3 minute story. There was something that they gave us to do, and I was going to do
Yeah.
something about like process. And a friend was like, "Come on, you can do something deeper, something more vulnerable than that."
Mm-hmm.
And I had never talked about my previous engagement and like that ending, and I hadn't talked about being emotionally vulnerable. Yeah, emotionally unavailable.
Mm-hmm.
And even bigger than that, and this realization I think came a little bit later on, was that I hadn't talked about the role that alcohol had played in my life and
Mm-hmm.
how that had held me back. But then, even beyond that, there's a reason that alcohol is a thing. And so you
Mm-hmm.
talk about family of origin, and there's a
Oh
whole
yeah.
world of stuff where having an alcoholic parent, having a what I'll say old school mom, a boomer who believes in keeping things quiet in the house, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like going through things, not really talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I had two really loving parents,
Yeah.
and I know part of it is also having the empathy to understand that they did the best that they could with what
Mm-hmm.
they had,
Right.
and even the part of the story like that a lot of people don't know is that part of the reason that my dad ended up in New York is because when he was young, the KKK burned down his father's farm, and that's how they ended
What?
up in upstate New York. And so he would
Wow.
eventually have some of these different issues, and you can just imagine, like I'm like if you just put yourself in the place of a child,
Yeah.
property being burned down, and just like the effect that something like that could have. And then I know my grandfather had different issues, and so
Mm-hmm.
there are all of these things that are like so important that I've been working on for self. But I know in general, there's this idea of like breaking the cycle, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is
Mm-hmm.
part of like what I was really working towards, that we all have cycles that we need to break.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be alcohol, it doesn't have to be drugs, it doesn't have to be porn, but there is usually something in our lives that if we could get that thing under control,
Mm-hmm.
it would open all sorts of other doors for us. And it could be something as simple as, waking up earlier, getting more in touch with spirituality, changing something in your daily routine. There are
Yeah.
so many different things that it could be. And like that message of breaking the cycle and just keep going, because
Yeah.
that's what I've done for so long is just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that the younger me and people who are going through whatever understand that it is possible to make some of these transformations and to bounce back from some of these obstacles, and also to overcome some of the things
Mm-hmm.
that may have been seminal in terms of the impact and the role that they had in our lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you say like bounce back, I'm just thinking, and I want to go back to the what state did your father live in when their farm got burned down?
Mississippi, Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Mississippi. Yeah. So deep South. And I'm from South Carolina, you know, it's obviously not as far as like, you know,
Yeah.
Mississippi or not. But I was telling you, you know, pre-call, I had done a lot of work in Indian country. My mom's native. My dad, my Melanie's dad is native. So all my work out here in Seattle has been in Indian country with the BIPOC community, and you know, black and brown, and mostly brown. But knowing this stuff and really understanding it, and then looking back in my own life and going, oh shit, although, you know, I mean, in South Carolina, like I easily pass as white, right? In South Carolina, you were white or black kind of thing. But out here, it's like, oh no, you're native, right? Okay, let's do whatever. And so it's a really different culture. But just thinking back in my own story, my mom, until she was like 6 or 8 years old, she drew water from a well. This is my mom, you know what I'm saying? Like in the deep South, just like super dirt poor, dirt floors, and how that impacts me. And when you said like, oh yeah, how do we bounce back? But in some communities, it's like, well, I'm not bouncing back. It's like I got to get all this stuff out of my life and change for the generational and move forward. You know what I'm saying? It's not like bouncing back, like, oh, we started up here, started at the top, now we're here, or started at the bottom, now we're. It's like, no, we're away from that. So it's not even a bouncing back. It's like the first time bouncing up, right? And all the upper
Mm,
limit problems that can show up in our lives now, you know, like for me, it's like, oh, what does a lot of money mean? You know, is my character ready for a fat bank account? Is my character ready for this, for this? In fact, I got moved by the spirit yesterday. Not really, but I wrote something about like character, and like, you know, all these things are trying to come to us, but we're blocking them if our character isn't ready, if our mind isn't ready, if our spirit isn't ready. And then even on the pre-call, and I know I'm bouncing all around here,
all
but
good.
even on the pre-call stuff, you said something. I was like, Rich, wait up, that might be an upper limit problem kind of thing. Do you remember what you were talking about? You remember what you said?
Yeah, I know exactly what it was because I joked that I forgot I was talking to a therapist because it's something that my therapist always is reminding me of, and that's this
Mm-hmm.
concept of there's always a shoe waiting to drop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where eventually, like, things are going so well, and I've been waiting, and that's probably contributed to some of the angst that I've been feeling. And being able
Mm-hmm.
to now feel that angst because I'm alcohol free is a completely different challenge.
You're not numbed
I'm
out. You're not checked out.
Yeah, that I'm learning day by day. But yeah, I was thinking that things have been going so well for so long that eventually something was bound to come up, and it even went as far. I didn't tell you this, but it went as far as that when I would get calls from home, I would
Mm.
just start getting anxious because a lot of times when I get calls from home, somebody is sick, somebody's died, something has had. That's just like I have a lot of older folks in my family. That's just
Yeah.
like the type of stuff that they talk about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's stuff that can also bring my energy down. But
Yeah.
I found myself just like kind of like waiting for something to happen, and then last week, somebody that I knew for over a decade, around the same age, passed away, and it's been kind of weird to see all of the positive things that people have said about them. And I'm a really big believer in giving people their flowers while they're here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I
And
love that. Mm-hmm.
so to hear and see all of that, and then I had some other weird things that came up, and even more recently, and this is where I think it becomes really upper limit. I'm also a big fan of the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I can't remember if that's
Yeah.
where that's in there,
Yep.
or one of his things.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all actually I think put me onto that too.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and I noticed it got to a point that, like, I'm starting to get all these like positive emails. Rich, we want you to come speak at this. Rich, you have an opportunity to meet this person. Rich, can you do this? And like, I'm at the point of like I can admit that like I'm at the point of overwhelm. And actually, after this conversation, I'm heading to Hawaii. But it
Yeah.
started creating all of these, like, should I be doing this? Do I need to be doing this other thing? Like, am I overwhelmed? Am I as good at this as I thought I was? Is this actually what I
Yeah.
wanted? This is what I've been wanting all my life. And it's created like all these like
Yeah.
different thoughts. And then there's my partner, and like, what's her role in this? Because there's the relationship, and then there's this world that I have. And
Mm-hmm.
so it sounds like I'm rambling, but that's also what the angst actually sounds like,
Right. Right. It's all these. It's like so we're doing a podcast, right? There's obviously a bunch of audio stuff here. It's like a lot of channels all turned up at once, and you're like, okay, let me make sense of this. Let me compartmentalize this here and put this here. Well, I got to get back to these people, and I got these opportunities going on. So what do I do? So it's like, how can we? and I wasn't even planning about this. Well, I kind of was, but I got this awesome book in the mail a couple of days ago. It's like, how can we quiet those things down? Because it's like, oh, this is what we want, and this is the life. People are, asking me to speak here. I got these new clients coming on board, and it's just boom, boom, boom. But then we wake up and go, oh, wait, what is this, right? And so the book is called, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but the book is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by some
Mm.
guy like this John Mark Comer. And I think he was a pastor actually, but I don't even know. I didn't know him before. But I'm only in literally chapter 1, and I'm like, this is so golden right here. It's already just the prologue. I was like, man, this has me thinking, because like you, I'm like, okay, yeah, we got to get these clients and build this program and do this and help these, this community out, or do that, or build our show, or all this, or, fly to Nashville because Ramsey's, whatever,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I'm like, when you're in that for a minute, it's like, this is more stressful than, like, I'm not even slowing down, and we have 3 kids, how am I going to be a parent and a husband and all this stuff? And it's just so trippy. It's like, I'm not enjoying any of it. And then we turn to things like alcohol or other, things to kind of check us out or numb us out. And then, of course, the thing that worked for a minute doesn't work anymore. It's doing more harm than good. Then we're like, oh, we got to sit. And like you said earlier, like, yeah, and now I'm alcohol free. I'm actually like feeling this tension rather than just numbing out a little bit. But I mean, you're a very self-aware person like yourself, is dealing with this stuff. Just tell me a little bit about that process for maybe other dudes who are listening who are like, oh yeah, man, that thing that Rich said, yeah, I experienced that, or I've heard that before, and am I feeling that kind of thing? Like, how do you sit with the discomfort? Because I always say on the show, the only way out is through. You
Mm.
can't, and I think one of the great Sigmund Freud quotes was, anything left unresolved always comes back later in uglier, bigger, grosser ways.
Always.
Always, right? At the moment,
Always.
we're like, oh no, put that over there. We can't do that. We can't do that, which has so many implications for a family of origin, right? Because if it sounds like we grew up in a similar way, you just, oh, don't talk about it. Just put it over here. It's cool. It's cool. But then now we're experiencing that, right? Kind of thing. So tell me a little bit about your process. When did you decide to go, no, I'm going through this. I'm not going to hit the bottle. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go through it. And are you glad you did so far?
Yeah. And you may have to ask me that again, but I think there's a really important story that I tell. It's something that's extremely clear from my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
that I think shaped a lot of how I am today. I can
Mm-hmm.
actually remember this night my dad had been drinking, and he Cliff Notes, nobody gets injured. He was drunk. He had a hammer in his hand. Me and my mom, we lived on the second floor of a house. We had to go out into the back porch. He's like, well, I forget what that, The Shining. He's like literally
Oh
The
yeah.
Shining the door with the hammer,
Oh
like in a drunken
man.
rage.
Yeah.
And there were neighbors next door, also older Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember screaming like help, like help, and the woman just like looking at us and just going back inside and closing the door.
Mm.
I will
I'm not getting
never
involved. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will never forget that. And I think getting back to the actual question, is weird how this stuff works. There's the sitting and going through it, and there's the breaking the cycle, but there's also dealing with the shame cycle,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which I think was a really big part of it for me, and was probably the hardest part to get through. Period, where it's, why is my dad this way, and why are
Mm-hmm.
neighbors seeing this way, like police come into the house, like this is really embarrassing,
Yeah.
jokes in school, and then I find that a lot of people who've had kind of these traumatic experiences, there's this ongoing like, am I good enough feeling
Mm-hmm.
that's like baked
Mm-hmm.
in there. And I think
Yep.
you'll find that a lot of people who are extremely high achievers, and I do consider myself a high achiever, you'll find that a lot
Absolutely.
of times they're not driven by positive outcomes. They're driven by shame, and they're
Right.
often driven by doing something wrong, or
Mm-hmm.
putting themselves in a position where they don't feel as valued. And so for me, like, I just got to a point where literally it was July 1st. 8:11 a.m. last year, where I was sitting there with a 22 ounce can of Steel Reserve malt liquor, and I was just like, yo, I'm tired of this. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm freaking like I'm tired of waking up feeling this way. I'm
Yep.
tired of getting outworked by people because this thing is it or these things are in my way. And this is all while I had a therapist. So you can imagine how
Yeah.
much work had probably been done up to that point.
Yeah.
And it was just a conscious decision. And initially it was like dry July. And then it was like, you know what, let me keep going with this. And
Yeah.
for the sitting in it, I mean, the depth of my conversations with my therapist have definitely increased. What
Mm-hmm.
was also really critical at that time was that I did start working with a leadership coach. He literally just fell into my life and was like, "Hey, I would love to start
Mm-hmm.
working with you. I've just been seeing some of the things that you were doing." So that it actually gets into that life portfolio idea
Yeah.
that you might have heard me talk about, where beyond me just kind of like sitting in and processing, there are these different people or things that I have in my life that are helping keep me grounded. So when things are going low, they don't go too low. And when things are going high, that they're
Mm-hmm.
also keeping me supported as well. So a big part of it for me has been actually having conversations with people, but not just people, with
Yeah.
men. And
Okay.
it's really challenging to find men to have those types just because of how we naturally operate. But
Right.
I found that some of the most impactful and helpful conversations for navigating through a lot of those feelings has been as a result of the conversations that I've had with men who've endured similar situations. And maybe it's not exact, but
Yeah.
they've endured similar things. And that's kind of also why I've started sharing more of this journey, because I'm like, there are a lot of people out, and I'm finding out now, Seth, I don't know what it is
Mm-hmm.
about these past few weeks. I think I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is, but I've had more people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I have a family member, someone is struggling. I saw that like you really struggle. Like, how did you get through it?"
Yeah.
And I think that also ties to purpose, which once I
Right.
became clear on the purpose part,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't drinking on top of that, like things
Mm-hmm.
just got a lot more clear in terms of like, this is what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing. Also reconnecting with values,
Yeah.
Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I read that last
Yes.
year as well. And that was like
Mm-hmm.
a good prompt for me to reconnect. So it's been all that to say, it's been a lot of work and installing the right pieces in my life to keep me afloat and help me get through those challenges.
Yeah. Man, you just said so much there. I want to hit on like, okay, men. So why? And obviously you pointed that out, it's not just reaching out to all these, people, it's like men specifically. So can we dive in? And this wasn't even in notes anywhere, but it's so rich. And I think like us guys need to hear it because there have been times, so many times when Melanie, my wife has said something, and then some other guy in my life of authority, usually an older dude or something, and I don't even have to know them. It can be on a podcast or something like that, or some other real life person says the exact same thing, and I'm like, shit, this is the best thing I've ever heard. Melly's like, I've said this for 10 years. What are you thinking? But it just hits. It hits different. You know what I'm saying? So why is that? Why do you think that is? And why was it important for you to hear it from other guys rather than,
Yeah.
grandmas or aunties or, other women in your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's been a habit that like a lot of my closest friends are women. And
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I've become cognizant of as well is that like there would be points where there'd be stuff that my close female friends knew that like my partner didn't know. And I'm like, that's not good. Like,
Yeah.
that is not good. So I think I need, and then also as people are forming their own relationships and getting more serious in their lives, I'm cognizant of that too. Like the emotional weight and load that I'm putting on other people when they have various
Mm-hmm.
things going on. So that's a factor. I think with men specifically, and it's something that I've probably realized a lot more so in the last few months as I've made connections with more men, is that when vulnerability we'll have to talk about, because that's like the first part of it. If you can't get through that, you're not going to be able to have these conversations and make that connection.
Yeah.
But like what you said, it's just the words, like the word choice. There's something in the way that I know not all men word things a certain way, but there's certain, particularly when I'm talking to a friend or someone who has a similar lifestyle, there are certain ways that they word things,
Mm-hmm.
or certain stories that they'll talk about in a way that like I think as a dude, like
Yeah.
that I understand, because a lot of times what they're sharing with me, they're not really sharing it with a ton of other people either, unless that's
Yeah.
part of their platform.
Yeah.
But I've found that like sometimes it'll just be there'll be something, there may be one word or one sentence in a 60-minute conversation, and that's the one word or one sentence that I needed.
Yeah.
And I found that uh also when I'm talking to men, it's tough love, but I don't feel this, like I don't feel the shame that I do when like I'm talking
Yeah.
to women and I'm sharing something and I'm like, this sounds bad, like I've done some like ugh.
Yeah.
Or if
Yeah.
they say something and it sounds like extra caring, it's like now they're like coddling me and I'm like, I don't want to feel
Yeah. They're
coddled.
like, I'm not a baby. I'm not your son. I'm not looking for that. I think maybe one of the things that we hear things differently from men rather than women is sometimes we need to get our ass kicked. You know what I'm saying? And if a woman is saying it, then just maybe that like nurturing kind of feminine thing, we receive it like that. But like the times where I've had the most growth in my life, and there's been a million of them, is one time when me and Melanie were going through a really hard time, and our counselor, our therapist, just looked at me straight in the eye, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And it was shaming, but it was eye opening because I was like, what the hell am I doing? What is this kind of thing? And it was a guy to a guy, and he was an older gentleman, someone I respected, and he was a therapist. I was like, you're exactly right. And of course, Melanie had said, what are you doing 1,000 times? But there was like shame and like all this stuff. But this dude was like, bro, what are you doing? And it
Yo,
hit. It
that
hit.
that you got it to a T with the except two letters instead of
Yeah.
bro, what are you doing? That's
Right.
that same, and like that's all it takes, because it's like the male home, like they usually know me differently. There's probably there's things that I'm sharing with them in a different language. And
Yep.
that bro, what are you doing? Or coming from a male, I accept it as you are on such a great path. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like what are you doing? Like, get back on your path, man. Get back. Like,
Yeah.
that's how I received that. Like, what are you doing? Whereas in like
Yeah.
other contexts, it's bro, you're effing up, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Um, or I'll say when I've had that conversation sometimes with women in the past, it's come off as like, yeah, you effing up. And I get that, because a lot of times it's been related to relationship issues where I have been
Right.
effing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just something in the simplicity of those words. I even have a friend right now who's deciding whether or not he's going to quit alcohol because he doesn't like the impact that it's having in his life. And
Uh-huh.
he hasn't talked to really anybody else about it.
Mm.
And I mean, he's talked to his therapist about it, but it's not something he's going around and shouting to the world. And there are some things that like I could say to him, because I've known him for a number of years and he
Yeah.
knows me, that I think if somebody else said to him, it would ignite the shame train, you know?
Yeah, yeah. But so this also makes me think of this other great book, which has I always give this caveat. I don't know why. Book called Wild at Heart by John Eldridge, and it has a super heavy Christian bent, which is fine. But the thing that I really took away from that book is he talks about just the kind of innate, inborn importance of another guy, another man speaking into another man's life and saying, like, reassuring, like, hey, I know that you have what it takes, right? So when it's like, bro, what are you doing? That's almost like implied, like, Rich, I know you got what it takes to go kick ass and build all this stuff. What are you doing? Why are you wasting this? You got what it takes. You can do this kind of thing. And in that book, I read that book like 4 times in 4 weeks, right? Because I was like, I have never heard of this before. And a lot of, we talked about family of origin stuff, maybe we didn't get these certain things from our dads, or from our uncles or the men in our life because they had their own stuff. Because guess what? Generationally, their dads had their own stuff and their dads had their own stuff.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I believe as a therapist and a person, all of us are trying to do the best we can with what we have at the moment, right? Barring some sort of, like chronic mental illness or, like serious mega stuff, most of us just like, yeah, if I have the tool, if I have a screwdriver and it's a Phillips head, then I will use that. I'm not going to use a hammer just because I'm an idiot kind of thing. It's like, I want to do its best. You know what I'm saying? So, just the fact, like, oh, I know somebody else, another strong man that I respect, believes in me. I'm going to use that as fuel to believe in myself, right? And sometimes we don't get that, but I think that's why one of the reasons, there's a whole dozen of them, that men hear things from men differently, and it just hits more, not in a shaming way, but it's like encouraging, it's uplifting. It's like, oh man, you're right. It's almost
Yeah.
like shining a flashlight on a part of us that we don't see, but we know is there. It's like, yeah, it's there somewhere, but I have
Yeah.
no idea how to get it. But this other dude does. Okay, if he sees it, then I can see it. Let me work on that. Let me think about that. Let me do some work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can put it in a broader context that I think it'll make sense to you and perhaps for a lot of listeners based off of their own listening habits. But
Mm-hmm.
even if you look at content that's considered in the bucket of personal development,
Mm-hmm.
which personal finance, even just kind of career advice and an approach that's like helpful, like leading someone along, that type of content tends to over index on women.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges that I've had so my audience for my podcast is like 75% women. And it's
Yeah.
been like that for a number of years. And I've talked to other folks who talk about content that's in the sphere of personal development,
Mm-hmm.
and that content tends to over index toward women because of the approach of that content. Whereas I find that men often gravitate to, like, they'll gravitate toward the more bravado shows where it's more about like power. And that's what I
Yeah.
mean by like those different word, like some of those different word choices, like
Yeah.
power, performance, you know, strength, control, being the
Yeah.
boss. So there's even a difference, I think, in wording that's innate, perhaps based off of gender, whatever it may be, that plays into how things relate. And I've always found that fascinating because I'm like, how do I get more men to listen
Yeah.
to this? And a part
Yeah.
of what I realized is that I have to change my language.
Ah, okay. Do you think that you were choosing your language on purpose around that, to be like, okay, I want to like appeal to everyone? Or like, have you been recently, I heard a redefinition of the word authentic, and of course that's a buzzword. Oh, be authentic and all this stuff. But somebody said, the core of authentic comes from author. So you can author whatever you want to, and then if you're authoring who you are and it's coming from the heart, then you're being authentic, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's a different way to hear that, huh? Okay, that hit. And I don't know if it was from a guy or a girl, but I was like, okay, that resonated. So in your like content creation, your platform, have you been doing that on purpose, or do you feel if you tweaked it a little bit, you would get back to more of who you are?
Uh, That's a fantastic question because it also ties to just my overall life experience. I
Mm-hmm.
dealt with bullying when I was younger. I was like
Mm-hmm.
the weird thing where uphill were the lower income homes, and then down the hill were like the lower middle class homes. And it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the whole train track thing divide.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
so I wasn't exactly wealthy. I also was like one of the only black kids in like the down the hill neighborhood. And so like I wasn't
yeah.
wealthy. To the kids up the hill, I was. And so there was bullying and a lot of time where I felt excluded. So my thing is, I don't want anyone to feel that way. So my thing is to make everyone feel included,
Ah.
to try to make everyone feel safe, to take the like you can do it soft approach. There's also a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of like the pleaser in
Oh
there,
yeah.
where like not
Yep.
wanting to offend. And in the process of doing that, I think what I realized is that the truest version of myself has taken a back seat because I've had to accept, when I do the Gallup Strength Finder, like competition is my number one driver. Like I'm an athlete. Like I love competing. I love performing. I love competing against self. I love competing
Yeah.
against others. And there's a lot more direct language that I would normally use that I found that I wasn't using via my mediums. And I kind of got to a point where I was like, man, like this isn't like I love talking about this topic. I love
Mm-hmm.
this audience that I've built. And I know a lot of people subscribe to this approach, but like I'm on a different level right now. Like
Yeah.
like the way that I'm thinking about performance and the way that I'm thinking about moving through life, it's much more coach inspirational than kind of like the soft, like, hey, everybody, we can do it.
Yeah.
And it even took there was like a period in my head where I was like, is that bad? And that's where you get into your therapist, that like good versus bad thing. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
is making anyone feel excluded a bad thing? And I
Yeah.
think part of and I think that making people feel excluded, I can't make people feel anything, you know.
Right. Yep.
Well, that's not completely true, but you know what I mean by that. Like I
Yeah.
can't.
But you can do certain things that create a feeling in other people, right?
Right.
Like I can't, we can't make people do anything, just like people can't make me do something, but they can do something that creates a feeling in me, right? So yeah,
Yes.
that's a big thing. We could talk about that all day, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that there's even some abandonment in there. It's crazy, man. Like there's
Yeah.
even some abandonment where people talk about like losing followers, but that was a big thing for me. Is like I don't want to lose people. I don't want people to like leave me, like walk away from me. I previously
Yeah.
had a co-host, and then it's like like once that dissolved, it's like okay, like I hope people don't leave me, and like just that. And I've
Yeah.
seen that show up in different aspects of my life, and I think I'm starting to gather. Control is a loaded word, but I'm starting to get a sense of like how all these different factors impact the way that I portray myself
Uh-huh.
online. And I think right now I'm probably as authentic as I've ever, because authenticity is actually my number one value.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm probably as authentic as I've ever been. And what I've also learned though is that now I'm starting to like see drops in my audience in different
Mm-hmm.
pockets as my language changes, as I step into what I'm doing on the competition front. There are people who are leaving, and I think a year ago it would have been like, oh man, like they don't like me. Like
Yeah.
what am I doing
Yeah.
wrong?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've also learned that when you, and I've even taken this away from Dave Ramsey, that like when you're intentional about your message and your purpose and you're unapologetic about who you are, people are
Yeah.
bound to jump off the train. People are bound to
Right.
not like you. People are bound to feel strongly. In fact, now when I see people dropping off, I'm like, okay, that means I'm saying something enough to at least move people in one direction or the other,
That's right. And, think about it this way. Okay. Like, like energy kind of universe wise. Okay. That person dropped off. Now there's space for the new person to come in who won't miss a show, who will be like, really take these things to heart. So like, like Thousand True Fans or whatever.
Yep.
But man, this is so trippy. Like, and I know you got to go here in a minute. So we this is like part one for real. This is like part one of a couple of conversations. But in reading this book, I was writing out stuff. Like, wait a minute, because I'm an Enneagram 9, and some of the things that you said, you're like, dude, are you gonna Enneagram 9? In some of it, like conflict, like people pleaser stuff like that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can't be all things to all people. That just ends up me being like, okay, well, who the hell am I, kind of thing, and I'm unhappy. So as I'm narrowing this down, like, okay, yeah, we'll lose people, but we'll gain the right people, and that's who, like, okay, the message is going to hit. That's going to be the people who get helped the most rather than these other folks. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's tons of shows that I've listened to for a long minute, and then they started going this way. I'm like, oh, all right, unsubscribe, whatever. Thanks for the wisdom, that I gleaned from that, in the
Yep.
times we were together, whatever. It's almost like a relationship, okay, there's good stuff, but it's just not working anymore.
Yeah.
So,
New
okay,
season.
whatever.
New
New
season of
season, right?
life. Yeah.
Right. And then being able to dive into who we are, as people, what our purpose is, showing up as our true authentic selves. And, that's a journey, right? And dang it, I know you got to go. And like half the stuff that I had in the notes, I'm like, oh, we'll talk about this and hit this. We didn't even talk about, but this has been so awesome. I want to leave a minute for people who like, okay, Rich, he's cool. I want to know more of what he does. Where can people find all that stuff about you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Instagram at I am Rich Jones. That's my personal account, but also where, and we didn't get to really talk about this, I'll be chronicling
Yeah.
my journey to getting back on track. So a long time ago, back in college, I was a long jumper in track and
Nice.
field, and every day since that senior season ended, pretty much with an injury, I've thought about returning to the track literally every day.
Nice.
And with alcohol out of the picture and some other moves I've made in my life, I've created the space to finally pursue this dream.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to be spending the next year training to get back in track and field shape, to compete during the outdoor season, and to compete at the USATF Outdoor Masters Track and Field Championships in the long jump again. So reviving a dream. So you can follow that, inspiration, motivation, also some personal fun stuff, the full range of my personality there. And then if you are interested in the personal finance, career development related content, you're thinking about getting out of debt or into a new job, follow at Pay Balances, Twitter and Instagram. And you can also visit paychecksandbalances.com. And once I create more space, there will be a Paychecks and Balances YouTube channel as well.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're super busy. You're out doing a million things. You're going to Hawaii tomorrow, so you got to probably go pack and get all ready and stuff like that. But thank you so much for taking this time. Like, for real, I want this to be part one, because I want to dive in, part two, to just continue this conversation, and track and field stuff. That's awesome. That makes me think. It's like, okay, Seth, what have you been wanting to do since you were 18?
That is, and I'll leave it with this, because part of what I realized with the track and field, that there was even a shame about, like, I fumbled this. I let 15 years go by. And part of what I realized is this was supposed to happen now. And this isn't just about me competing and jumping a certain distance. This is about the way this is the most authentic way that I can inspire people while doing something that I love. And even for you to be like, man, what can I do? Like, that is exactly what I want. And that tells me that it actually gives me chills to hear you say that, because I'm like, that is the biggest single reason that I'm doing it.
Yeah. It's your big leap.
It is.
Right? Long jump, big leap.
Yo.
That's crazy.
Yes, I love that.
That's awesome.
But I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate you giving me the platform, because this is the stuff that I really love talking about.
Yeah, for real. Part two or even part three, I'd love to have you back on. We'll connect, way later after you get back from Hawaii and stuff like that. But Rich, thank you so much. You guys go check out his stuff, get inspired, get out of debt, get authentic. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, later.